so we can get going. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. I'm going to be giving information about, wetland basics, what we know about our wetlands in Vermont, and a bunch of information about our permitting program, how we're investigating wetland impacts, our wetland assessment work, and our wetland mapping, all of the data associated with the program there, and then also ending with information on how you can make a positive difference for wetlands. I'll have links throughout this document, and I just want you to know that these will be made available after the presentation, so don't feel like you have to be scribbling them down. Just sit back and relax and enjoy the beautiful scenery of the slides. Okay, so for starters, wetlands are where land and water meet. Wetlands are really diverse because they can be anything from a really deep water marsh to just a soggy meadow area, forested swamp. It could be a vernal pool, like this one displayed here, which is only saturated certain times of the year. Wetlands are basically areas that are saturated or inundated by surface or groundwater with a frequency sufficient to support the prevalence of water-loving plants. This can be just saturated soil within 12 inches of the soil surface for 2 weeks straight out of the growing season, which in Vermont is May through September. So, some wetlands can be fairly cryptic because of that. But because there's such a difference in the time that water is present and the depth of water, we have a lot of diversity, like shown in this image here. To technically identify wetlands, we look at whether there's a prevalence of water-loving plants, if there's presence of water, and if there are hydric soils, which might be deep, dark soils or soils that are gray with orange dots and such like that. These areas can be harder to identify if there's drought or disturbance, and wetlands in developed landscapes may not be so obvious, but they're still quietly providing ecosystem services on an edge of a lawn. Like in this image, the area that's not mowed is in fact wetland. And this wetland that's adjacent to a newly developed parking lot is still providing ecosystem services. So in the state of Vermont, when a wetland provides one or more functions and values at a significant level, the state protects them as worthy of the regulatory process. We require permits for activities in Class 1 and Class 2 wetlands and their buffer zones. Class 1 and Class 2 wetlands both have one or more significant functions and values. This is not the same regulation as the federal 404 dredge and fill program. Like some states, like most states, we have some exemptions for certain sectors like agriculture and forestry. Our permitting requires folks first demonstrate that they can avoid and minimize impacts before compensating for losses of wetland function and value. What we've found is historically, Vermont lost 35% of wetland area in the state, which has been drastically slowed down with regulations, both federal and state. And around 4% of the state of Vermont is wetland today, all scattered throughout pockets across our landscape. And this is a good thing because wetlands provide wet ecosystem services. Globally, This service is worth over $47 trillion annually, which is more than from forest deserts or grasslands. Peatlands store 30% of land-based carbon, which mitigates the effects of climate change. Over 50% of Vermont plant species are found in wetlands, and over 40% of rare, threatened, and endangered species in the United States rely on wetlands for survival. So that's why we have a wetlands program and have various activities that we do to help maintain and protect these important resources. So I've included a picture of our entire team here. Maybe you've worked with one of us, so maybe we look familiar to you. We're a friendly bunch, and we have various tasks that we do. One of them is identify wetland locations with maps and one-on-one site visits. We assess the health of wetlands through biomonitoring. We support voluntary wetland restoration, and the bulk of our work is implementing the Vermont wetland rules, where we're implementing permitting for activities in wetlands such as grading, filling, clearing vegetation, and drainage as well. So we're requiring avoidance where it's possible, and we're ensuring no net loss of wetland function or value. And that includes working with enforcement as well. So now I'm diving into our data from our permitting program. So this figure gives a general geographic locations of our 2016 through 2020 wetland projects in relation to watershed planning basins. A concentration of the projects is in the northwest portion of the state, as you can see. And the data that I'm about to provide is only for activities that need a permit. Like I mentioned before, we do have a list of activities which alter wetlands that do not need a permit, and those aren't included in here. Neither impacts to Class 3 wetlands or exempt farmed wetland activities. Not all permitted projects happen or have happened during the 2016-2020 time period. This is just what we've tallied for issued permits. On average, we permit around 144 permits per year. This review period is nearly 800 permit decisions. Impacts include temporary alterations to the wetland, like trenching and then putting the materials back, cover type change, forested to shrub, and also fill or draining activities in the wetland or the buffer zone. So this figure breaks down the permitted losses and alterations by planning basin. Now don't panic. I also have numbers on wetlands restored that I'll get into in a little bit, but I wanted to just highlight what we're looking at in permits. So this is all of the different activities that we're permitting. So some of these activities, there's still wetlands involved. You can see that Lake Memphremagog had the most impacts, which is Basin 15, up and over here, Northern Lake Champlain Basin, and the Otter Creek Basins. They received over 50% of the permitted impact approvals. And these are located in Grand Isle, Franklin, Chittenden, Addison, and Rutland counties. The Northern Lake Champlain Basin accounted for 30% of the permitted wetland fill, followed by Memphremagog and Otter Creek basins. So the permitting process may require or encourage wetland and buffer zone gains and improvements through restoration, creation, enhancement, and conservation. The majority of wetland and buffer gains associated with permits were due to mitigation requirements for impacts. However, there's also some significant voluntary gains as well. A total of 53 acres in this time period were gained, restored, or created 93 acres were either enhanced or conserved, and over 108 acres of buffer zone was improved. So taking that with the last slide, we find that there was a net gain of wetland overall in the state for the time period of over 18 acres. That net change was variable across the 4 major basins in Vermont. So here I have the 4 basins, and the majority of restoration or gains occurred in the Richelieu and the St. Francois areas. This graph doesn't include all of the great work of voluntary wetland restoration happening with our partners. For example, NRCS, during the 2011 to 2015 time period, restored nearly 200,000 acres of wetlands, so from 2011 to 2015. And this was made possible by farmers volunteering their marginal croplands for restored ecosystems. So thank you, farmers. The Department of Fish and Wildlife has been working on acquiring lands for wetland restoration since 2018, as well as other projects that they've done in the past, duck stamped and the like. But for this particular wetland acquisition project, they've acquired around 1,900 acres, and they estimate that around 1,400 acres is restorable wetland. That number may have gone up since I last asked. Okay, so besides permitting, we're also investigating complaints and activities that are occurring where we haven't issued permits. Our investigations are primarily complaint driven, and staff work with the enforcement officers in our department to investigate and reach compliance on sites. On average, we have 180 new investigations a year, where what we're finding is, more than half of them are found not to be violations, but we definitely do find them, and we work for voluntary corrections, and in other cases, if necessary, we take it to the next level that may require litigation. Okay, so what about last year? I was showing you up to 2020, but we also have some numbers for 2021. So this was tallied based off of notifications from permittees saying that they had started work during 2021. So this isn't what we permitted in 2021. So what we found was we did have a net gain for the year 2021, where 98 projects were reported. And for that, 7 counties had more wetland gain than loss: Addison, Caledonia, Chittenden, Essex, Grand Isle, Lamoille, and Windham counties. And Chittenden's wetland gain was pretty huge, and that was thanks to some voluntary enhancements from a subdevelopment in Williston. And then 6 of the counties actually had a net loss, but overall, we're seeing a net gain. Another interesting point is that our permit issuance in 2021 increased by over 1/3 from previous years. That's a significant jump, and it'll be interesting to see the data going forward. So besides permitting and evaluating wetlands while permitting, we also do wetland biomonitoring. We have detailed level 3 assessments. We have a rapid assessment that involves some in-field and desktop review, which I'll talk about more in the next slide. And then we have level 1, which is desktop review and essentially maps, like this one you see here. Now, it's a fairly small program and our bio criteria is still under development, but what we're attempting to do is be able to score different wetland cover types as high quality, low quality, and moderate qualities. And our VRAM, our rapid assessment method, is getting us closer to being able to do that. And we need more samples to be able to infer the health across a basin. So here's some of the metrics that we're looking at with the rapid assessment method, and some of the scores that we received in the Lamoille River Valley, red being low quality, green being high. And we can't use this to say overall Lamoille Valley's looking pretty good, because these weren't randomly sampled. They're based off of places where we had permission, knew where the wetlands are. And as we get more information about wetland mapping, we'll be able to do more of a random sample. But this is a really promising tool that we have. And we've also been training community scientists on how to do this. So this might be something you might be interested in, and we're welcome to talk with you about setting up a training to perhaps get more data from your group. This piece we are really excited about. Our wetland maps are in need of a lot of help, and we've received monies to finish the entire state. This slide just shows those areas that we already know when we're anticipating the work to be finished. So the gray areas are going to be updated. And this is really important because, for example, if you're a chicken farmer, you want to know how many roosters and how many laying hens you have. We need to have a better sense of how many bogs we have in the state, how many forested wetlands and the like. And so this will get us closer to having that information. We are in the process of updating our Vermont significant wetlands inventory, which this slide shows a picture of some of the edits where teal areas are where they're being updated to, where ones that were never detected are added, and those that did not have wetlands are being removed, and just some changes to the lines and such so that the public has better information out there. And this is something I'm hoping Mary can put this in the chat of a link to our website that has more information, because we are looking for public comments right now on this mapping. Okay, so shifting gears now to speaking more about what you can do to help maintain Vermont wetland functions and values. I'm going to give you a smattering of ideas so you can find what might be a good fit for you, but anything you're able to do is really helpful, and we definitely appreciate it. Number one is help us find important wetland areas. This is really the baseline for wetland management, like I was mentioning before. And vernal pools is one really exciting place that your whole family can participate in, and is a really fun way to start. In the spring, wood frogs and salamanders across the state make their way to vernal pools, laying eggs like this one right here in Hannah's hand. And there is a community science project called the Vermont Vernal Pool Monitoring Project that's held by the Vermont Center for Eco Studies. And they're collecting data about vernal pool usage, and they're adding them onto maps as to where they're located. We don't know where all of our important vernal pools are, and these are very critical habitats for these species to continue to thrive in Vermont. So this is a really rewarding piece of work that you can be doing, and vernal pools are really hard to find. So the more eyes and ears, definitely the better for us. As part of our wetland mapping work, we need to go about and although these maps are being updated with a lot of remote um, remote information, we are going out onto the site and spot checking it. And you can help us with doing that spot checking by going out onto lands where you have permission and use the iNaturalist program to identify wetland species to add to the Vermont Wetland Mapping Project. And that information will go to our program and we'll be able to say, oh yeah, it looks like we weren't able to map this area. We should look at it a little closer because someone found a cattail and things like that. So we have several people who are working in this project, and we have a online tutorial that we can share with you after this presentation. Okay, so just spreading the word that not all wetlands are mapped and that wetlands need to be searched for sites where construction projects are designated is really huge, is really helpful. So if you're, having conversation with folks who are looking to build on a new parcel, it may feel kind of forward to ask, hey, have you thought about whether there's wetlands on that site? But it can really save someone a lot of time and heartache for us to be able to identify where the wetlands are before any work starts, before anything's even designed, is really helpful. So here's some links that are useful that you can share with people that your colleagues and friends and family. We have a wetland screening tool, which there's a presentation about. You just add in your address and it tells you the likelihood of wetlands. The inventory maps, of course, gives a wealth of information. Our landowner's guide gives you some tips and tricks for trying to figure out if there's wetlands before you get a professional involved. We have a list of consultants who are willing and able. It's not a certification program, but we do provide a list of folks who do wetland delineations in Vermont to help the general public. We have a program inquiry form, so if you ever want to talk to your district wetlands ecologist, you can provide them information about your parcel. And of course, we have a great YouTube channel with a lot more information about wetlands that you can spend a bunch of time learning more. Another thing you could do is give your wetland a buffer. Left to their own devices, wetlands are really resilient and can passively restore. If you have a wetland or a wetland on a town property that could use a buffer, you could start with just not mowing within that buffer to improve stormwater infiltration before it reaches the wetland. Or, better yet, you could plant some native tree saplings and shrubs to provide a screen. Our regulation is for a 50-foot buffer zone, but larger buffers provide more of a buffer for the wetland to provide more functions and values. Going even further, you could help us find restoration sites and connect landowners with organizations which do restoration. So ideal wetland restoration sites are those that have been historically that historically functioned as a wetland, but were converted for other uses like ditching and draining. And for the Lake Champlain Basin, you can use this this tool that we have of wetland restoration potential, red being highest potential, green lower, but still might be worth looking at. And we updated this in 2017, and it tells you those areas that would be best for phosphorus attenuation. And this website, which we will be providing, provides more information on funding and other resources that you can use for wetland restoration work. And you can also consider petitioning a wetland for Class 1 protection, which are our most irreplaceable and remarkable wetlands in the state that receive the highest level of protections by the state in a larger buffer zone. 100 foot is the standard width. This is a picture of Eshqua Bog that the town of Heartland successfully petitioned. And as part of the map update, we are also adding this wetland as Class 1. And the basin plans include lists of wetlands that have high potential for Class 1 status. They're called candidates in the basin plans, and those that need more research are also listed. And we really need community groups to help with outreach to landowners and the community to help people understand the importance of these wetlands and help them learn about the Class 1 designation process. And finally, just enjoy these spaces with your friends and family. Visit wetlands and get to know them. And you know, these are really rewarding places to visit, really diverse places to visit, and you can really turn people on to why these areas need protection and why we're restoring them throughout the state. And you can start by placing in the chat even a wetland that you like to explore to inspire others on this webinar to maybe go check it out. So with that, I'll stop and listen to your comments and questions in the chat, and it sounds like you can also have the option of raising your hand to speak. So thank you.
Thanks, Laura. That was amazing. We have a couple of questions. I encourage everyone to add any more to the chat or raise your hand, but we have a couple questions from Dan. The first being, will Class 2 wetlands be updated as well?
Yeah, so the process that we're going through is we're updating the mapping in general and placing that onto our advisory layer, which is non-regulatory. And then we are filtering those wetlands based off of the characteristics that signify that they're very likely to be significant in function and value. And those are the ones that are currently on that interactive map that I was showing that would be added to the Vermont Significant Wetlands Inventory. So that would be Class 2 wetlands.
Great. And could you talk about the interplay with town wetland regulations?
Yeah, some towns have their own separate regulations. So in those towns, you have federal, state, and town regulations. We just completed with UVM students a look at which towns have separate wetland regulations and which ones do not. Not all towns are the same. There are quite a number of towns that have zoning that basically say you need to follow the wetland rules and get a state wetlands permit, where other ones have things like a wider wetland buffer. So you should check out your town regulations to make sure that you can get those permits as well if they're necessary.
Awesome. And then can you talk about how roads indirectly create wetlands?
Yeah, they sometimes can, or they can change the hydrology of wetlands. So a lot of our roads in Vermont were created long before wetland regulations were put in place, and sometimes run straight through wetland areas, and that can serve as somewhat of a dam, where on the uphill side, you can have more water pooling and causing the area to have that saturated soil for the time period that then you have the prevalence of water loving plants, and ta-da, you have wetland. Um, so that's where roads can create or change the hydrology of wetlands as well.
Right. We have another question from Alice, which is, can you talk about invasive species removal and wetland health?
Yeah, certainly. So invasive species tend to lower the diversity of wetlands, lower the amount of food sources for different animal species. So removing invasive species can improve wetland health. There are some areas where there's so much invasive plants, it might be really hard to do anything about it, but there are certainly areas of the state where the invasive plants haven't gotten a foothold yet, and it is definitely worthwhile to go out there and pull them, or even look at other sources like look at herbicides, which if you are doing more than just hand pulling of invasive species, that's something that needs approval by our program. And we're happy to talk with folks more about how to go about doing that simple process.
Great. Okay, I see a couple hands. Before I go to them, I just want to mention that we have a feedback survey I'll be putting in the chat. So if you would please give us your feedback, we'd really appreciate it. But yeah, now I'll go to Dan. Thanks for raising your hand.
Yeah, thanks, Laura, and thanks, Mary, for putting this on. I just want to put in a plug for clean water service providers. The state's about to give us, we're Chittenden County Regional Planning, we'll be doing Basin 5. Northwest is doing the Missisquoi Basin and Lamoille Basin. Central Vermont RPC is doing the Winooski Basin. Madison County is doing, like, what is that, Otter Creek and all that. And then Pulteney Meadowy is Rutland RPC, and PMNR, Pulteney Meadowy NRCD. And Lake Medford Magog is Vermont Housing Conservation Board, and the state, Mary and Laura and their friends are giving us millions of dollars starting July 1st to do phosphorus reduction on non-regulatory projects. So by definition, one of the biggest things is wetlands restoration. So all you watershed groups out there, all you citizens, all you local conservation commissions, work with those folks in the Lake Benfragog and Lake Champlain basins, talk to them, get to know them. The Basin Water Quality Councils are forming, and sometime in July, late June, July, August, we'll start saying, hi, give us projects, come to us. And that's really cool to find out about that wetlands restoration data layer, because I didn't even know it existed, and I'm supposed to be in charge of this stuff, at least for Basin 5. So I'm excited, and we're about to, we and all the other clean water service providers are about to issue an RFQ to get tons of engineers on board and scientists and all that stuff, and go out and find these projects, design them, and eventually get them done, because bang for the buck. That's the best way. That and floodplain restoration are the best way to lower phosphorus. And all. So we're excited about this opportunity and this tool, and working with DEC. So thanks.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. It also goes back to my plug We'll be talking about that in June. Martha, you're still muted.
Oh, good morning, and thank you for that. So we are about
I don't know if you're.
Yeah, am I unmuted now? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I hear you now.
Okay, thank you. So we're about to embark on a, 3-year, watershed action plan. And one of the components of it is the analysis of the wetlands at Lake St. Catherine watershed. And actually, there may be others as well who are doing same. We were just wondering, as we get through that process, is there someone who could walk, the journey with us in your shop, just to see that we're as sophisticated as we can be in doing the analysis, and then with the findings, kind of the so what after it, just trying to understand a little bit better the resources from the folks who are on this line.
Yeah, definitely. If you have a draft, we'd be happy to take a look at it and give you suggestions while you're working through that.
That's great. Thanks very much.
I see one hand from Martha.
Oh, Laura, that was Martha. I think that was just speaking.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No worries.
Taking her hand down yet. Well, if anyone else has any more questions, we have another. But if not, I'll just say that and the slides will be on our web, and we'll be sending out a follow.
Hey, Mary, I think your audio is breaking up a little bit. I'm happy to just jump in. It might be a
feedback.
Oh, maybe it's just me.
No, it's happening for me too, Emily.
Okay. I think what Mary is saying is that the next lecture series will be on June 30th, talking about the new Clean Water Service Provider Network, and that there will be, after this session, an evaluation form emailed out, and we appreciate your feedback, and that the recording and the PowerPoint slides will be posted on the Clean Water Lecture Series webpage. Mary Rachel, was there anything else you wanted to highlight?
I think that's everything. Thanks for stepping in for me.
No problem, Mary. I think it was just a little connectivity issue. So glad we got the message across. Thanks so much, everyone.
Right. Good afternoon.
Have a great afternoon. Thanks for coming. Nice work, Laura. That was a great talk.